All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. Even before the polls opened in Texas, a little bit of controversy as late night show host Stephen Colbert said his interview with Texas Democratic Senate candidate James Talarico was pulled on Monday night's broadcast over network fears it would violate regulatory guidance from the FCC about giving equal time to political candidates. And this is from our Fox 4 team, Stephen Dial, saying FCCU. Those are the words from Stephen Colbert, saying CBS lawyers blocked him from airing his interview, citing an FCC equal time rule. The full interview is, of course, on YouTube. And Colbert, during that broadcast, said, quote, "He was supposed to be here, but we were told in no uncertain terms by our network's lawyers who called us directly that we could not have him on the broadcast." Talarico posted a nearly minute-long clip on social media. Of course, Talarico responding also on social media to what's going on with this, saying this, and broadcast networks have been required to give equal time to political candidates, but that rule traditionally not applied to talk show hosts. You can see there from Talarico talking about this. Let's bring into the conversation right now former FCC General Counsel Tom Johnson. Tom, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And of course, this is so very interesting. And does the equal time rule even apply to Stephen Colbert?
Randy, thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. It's interesting seeing those clips from the Late Show that you all just televised. I mean, you would think they're trying to put blame for this squarely at the feet of the current administration. This is a rule that has been around for 100 years. It's actually a rule instituted by Congress starting back in 1927 in the Radio Act, and it continues to today. And the purpose of the rule is not, as you saw candidate Talarico suggest, to stifle free speech. In fact, it's meant to promote free speech. It's meant to give viewers access to a number of different points of view from all legally qualified candidates for office on scarce public airwaves.
Yeah, that is a good explainer. And of course, they're kind of citing that equal time rule by the FCC. Are there certain guidelines or exceptions to that rule?
Yes, well, in the 1950s, Congress put into place a bona fide exception to the equal time rule that applied to certain broadcasts or newsworthy events. And the key language, again, in the statute is bona fide. What Congress was trying to make sure was that the exception to the rule was not abused by programs that were engaging in partisan politics, that it was left for genuine news events. And so over the years, there's a number of FCC documents and FCC orders out there determining that particular programs fell within that exception and other programs fell outside that exception. I think what happened here, if you look at CBS's statement that they publicly released, that their internal counsel said, look, there's going to be a question if you do this as to whether you qualify for the bona fide news exception. So we're going to give you some options here. Either comply with the equal time obligations if you go down that route, or else choose a platform like YouTube or a streaming service that isn't covered by the equal time rule.
Yeah, that is a good understanding of it. And of course, if Stephen Colbert did air this interview, would Stephen Colbert or would CBS as a whole would have to kind of play by that equal time rule? Would they have to air another Democrat at a later time, or would it have to be on Stephen Colbert's show?
Right, so the ultimate obligation, the public interest obligation, the equal time obligation, rests with the local affiliates, the broadcasters that actually hold the FCC licenses. So what the FCC says is you need to provide equal time, so that's comparable time in terms of audience reach, approximate time of day. It would not have needed to be exactly on the Stephen Colbert show, and it would not even have been automatic yet. What happens is the local stations would place a notice in a public file that would give other candidates the opportunity to come forward and say, hey, we would also like time on your network. So all of that would need to happen before you would even trigger an obligation to host a competing candidate, right? And here, who would that be? That would be the two other Democratic candidates running against Mr. Talarico in this primary in Texas.
Yeah, that is a good understanding of that. I want to get into, you mentioned just the history of some of these equal time rules in the FCC, but in January, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, issued new guidance warning late night and also daytime hosts that they need to give political candidates equal time. Has this changed at all under the Trump administration, under FCC's Brendan Carr? Is it being altered, or is this just the first instance we're seeing of it?
I don't think it's been altered, Andy. I mean, if you look at every election season, what the media bureau that handles these issues that the FCC does is they put out advisories during an election year that cover things like the lowest unit charge rule, that cover things like the political foul rule. There's a host of obligations that broadcasters have going into election year. And every election year, you'll see the media bureau say, we're going to remind you of these obligations. What that January notice did was it synthesized a lot of incoherent, inconsistent precedent over the years. The FCC said that Jack Parr's Tonight Show did not qualify for the bona fide news exemption, but the Jay Leno show did. So there was a lot of inconsistent guidance. What the FCC did was synthesize that and say, look, it all comes down to this factual determination of what it means to have a bona fide news broadcast. So you use that, or using that as part of newscasting, or you're using that for partisan purposes. It appears that CBS Counsel here said, look, there's going to at least be a question on this. So we're going to take a conservative view. There's legal risk, and we're going to give you some options. You air the programming and then you provide equal time, or you put it on a streaming service. And so it appears the Late Show ultimately decided to go the route of putting this on an unregulated streaming service.
Yeah, they didn't want to test the waters. And of course, this on network television would have got a lot of eyeballs, but now the controversy is surfacing. It's posted in full on YouTube, and you can imagine how many views that has as well. Just for clarification, in terms of network television versus what's going on YouTube, because it was an interview, it just did not air. Can you clarify that, how those two are viewed differently by the FCC?
Well, Andy, I mean, the FCC's core responsibilities relate to broadcast television, the idea, and radio, the idea being that you're going to be a steward of the nation's scarce public airwaves. There are certain obligations that come with that. You're absolutely right. These are obligations that in the media ecosystem, the modern media ecosystem, only broadcasters are saddled with. You look at all the big tech media behemoths, they are not saddled with these additional regulatory obligations. So there are broader policy discussions about how heavily do we continue to regulate broadband when it's dying, broadcast when it's dying, when it continues to be an important source of local news and entertainment for a lot of communities around the country. What should we do about that? But under the current rules, I mean, I think what CBS advised as to the application of the equal time rule was correct here.
All right, very good. And my last question before I let you go, because we talk about this in late night shows, and in past months we've seen obviously criticism of others, including Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Kimmel, I should say. He was pulled off the air for comments made about the fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk. He was eventually put back on the air. Are these incidents similar at all, or are they completely separate?
Well, I do think they're separate in the sense that, especially in this instance, you're talking about an unbroken history of 100 years of the equal time rule being in effect, not having at all a partisan valence. I mean, this is a rule that applies equally to Democrat or Republican candidates. But I would agree that all of the instances you're talking about, these are parts of broadcasters' public interest obligations. And again, it comes from the fact that they are considered the custodians of these scarce public airwaves. And so this is a charge that first and foremost Congress has given, and that the FCC under administrations, Democratic and Republican over many decades have applied these rules. So getting a lot of attention right now, but they have had sort of a long-standing bipartisan provenance.
Yeah, plenty of attention on this as primary season underway there in Texas. Tom, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, your insight here on Live Now.
Really appreciate you having me on, Andy. Take care.
All right. Thank you so much. Of course, we're diving into the latest there and taking the conservative approach. CBS opting not to air that interview last night. I want to put up the statement from CBS talking about the Late Show was not prohibited by CBS from broadcasting the interview with the Representative James Talarico, that Democratic Senate candidate. The show was provided legal guidance that the broadcast could trigger the FCC equal time for two other candidates, including Jasmine Crockett. The Late Show decided to present the interview through its YouTube channel with on-air promotion on the broadcast rather than potentially providing the equal time options.